I just think healing is way more fun when orgasms are involved.
And I talk about the work of a specific somatic therapist turned dominatrix who's led thousands and thousands of people to reconnect with intimacy in a different way.
Using things like impact play or using things like bondage and restraint release chemicals in our brain, serotonin and adrenaline. That chemical cocktail is what creates the altered state of consciousness without needing the outside plant. I had this man, he had a desire to be kidnapped by powerful Amazonian women. We kidnapped him on the street, threw a bag over his head and threw him into a trunk of a car. I let him know, but this time you have to ask for everything. And he cried the whole time. And at the end of the scene, he was sharing like, wow, if I can ask for what I want here, why can't I ask for it anywhere? Honestly, like I truly believe if we had more freedom here and more liberation here, there'd be a lot less war.
You're listening to The Human Upgrade with Dave Asprey.
If you read Heavily Meditated, you might have noticed there's a chapter called Go Spank Yourself. And I talk about the work of a specific somatic therapist turned dominatrix who's been on the Oprah Winfrey Show and has been on Nightline and has led thousands and thousands of people to reconnect with intimacy in a different way. And she's been on the stage at my biohacking conference. And by the way, biohackingconference.com, if you'd like to check that out. It's a lot of fun. But this is her first time coming on the show. I'm talking about none other than Kimi Inch.
Hi.
Kimi, welcome.
Thank you. It's really exciting to be here.
I look at different ways to enter altered states.
Right.
And that's what Heavily Meditated was really all about. And I talk about breath work and meditation. But I also, in large part, thanks to you, included Tantra and conscious kink as ways to enter altered states for healing.
Right.
That are just as valid as taking a bunch of mushrooms in the forest. Mm-hmm. Why do people go into such altered states? Not when they're just in, intimacy, but when they're using some of the kinkier parts of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting too, because when you're playing with the erotic, again, there's a heightened state that's happening. Mm. If you take enough mushrooms, you're going to get blasted off into another dimension, right? Yeah. But it's not the same with the erotic per se. There's a necessity for building a strong foundation with someone. So that would require good communication skills and trust and safety and things where you feel like you can actually let go and lean in. And once you have that established and you're starting to introduce things like breathing through the genitals, and if you are also like using things like impact play or using things like bondage and restraints, these are things that release chemicals in our brain that are like serotonin and adrenaline and oxytocin and endorphins. And that chemical cocktail is what creates the altered state of consciousness. And that's a way for somebody to actually shift their perspectives on something because they're in this heightened state, similar to medicine journeys, but without needing the outside plant. It's all our internal medicine. And when we learn that we have this internal medicine within us, we can start to realize that we are actually, the DOMs are the creators of our own experience, that we don't actually need anything outside of ourselves in order to achieve those sorts of experiences.
Well, you might need a spicy partner.
Sometimes you do, but I've had some incredibly expansive experiences through self-pleasuring as well. That included not just masturbation, but also included different forms of taboo play practices. And
just by yourself?
By myself, absolutely. And still being able to release those types of chemicals in my body and have this heightened state of expansion in that practice. But it definitely is more fun, I think, when you can do it with a partner and play with somebody at the same time.
At least if it's the right partner.
Absolutely.
And it's just like with psychedelics. If you're doing it in an unsafe place with people you don't trust, you're probably not going to have a good trip.
Right.
And if you're going to these places with intimacy, if you're doing it with someone who's not safe, kind of defeats the purpose of healing, right?
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting. I was working with this client, this woman who was telling me, she's not having the life that she wants. She's not working in the job that she wants to be in, and she's not having the relationships that she wants. And I started to notice something really interesting about her, that this woman had a really hard time receiving help, like, oh, no, I've got it, like very much independent, if you will. And even receiving a compliment, like, oh, what, this old thing, I bought this on sale. And I noticed when we started to work together and bring that into the erotic play space, I noticed she had a really hard time receiving pleasure as well. It was almost like her mind needed to feel like she earned it on some level. And she had a hard time just letting that in. And I think the art of receiving is also being able to let something in. So we were taking the erotic as a way of looking about what's blocking her from what she wants to have in life, which is her. It's usually you at the end of the day. We're usually our own worst enemy when it comes to not being where we want to be. So we looked at that and we actually created scenes together where she would step into her surrender. I would tie her up. I would lead her through experiences where she would have to be in a state of surrender. And she started to learn kind of like through muscle memory and through actually having an embodied experience of something, of how to receive, so that when she was out in the real world, she was able to receive more of what life was offering her.
So it's a shift in her energy that happened because of it.
Absolutely. And because she was in an altered state of consciousness, her brain started to look at like, oh, the stories I have around receiving, like, I don't want to be selfish. I don't want to be too needy. I don't want to take up space. She learned this when she was a little girl. And she realized when she was having this erotic experience with me in a safe space, her brain started to say like, oh, maybe these belief systems that I'm holding aren't serving me after all. Maybe these are outdated. And maybe I am okay to receive and it doesn't make me a bad person. And that if I can receive here in the play space, maybe I can receive out into the world as well.
It's interesting you brought up surrender. And when people are doing psychedelics or breath work, there comes a point where you're going to have to let go. And if you don't, it's really painful.
Yes, it's not fun.
Right. And this conscious kink practice seems like a way to teach people to learn how to surrender, which is a necessary state for personal evolution.
Right.
And it's something that seems like it's particularly hard for guys. We're taught not to be vulnerable, not to surrender.
Right.
And I want you to talk more about, what does surrender mean and what happens in people's lives when they learn that as a skill through erotic play?
The elements of being able to surrender is really being present, right? Getting out of agenda. And a lot of men have been taught to be in a performance mode where if the woman or that they're with it hasn't had several orgasms, then they're failing on some level. So
that's true. Yeah.
But the thing is that creates an unspoken pressure to show up a certain way instead of just being with a person in their experience and wherever they're at in that moment. And that is usually what opens a woman or a person up more, is just to feel accepted for wherever they are, as opposed to, I need you to be this in order for me to feel better. So we get curious around like, well, what's the intention that you're holding? Because if the intention is for validation and to feel like you need someone's response to give you value, that's going to keep you both from the full potential of what's possible. But surrender is about just being really present with what is showing up in the moment. And it can be really challenging for men, especially, to let that go and just show up with what's going on.
What makes someone a good dom?
So for me, someone who's a good dom understands that it's actually not about control at all. And quite often, people think domination is all about controlling another person. But what's really happening is that someone who's a good dom, first and foremost, understands that attunement is the most important element when it comes to play. We can talk about communication all day long. And yes, communication is important. It is important to ask for what you want. It is important to name your boundaries. It is important to, talk about what you need, but it's only going to take you so far. Being able to tune into somebody's breathing and noticing what's going on with their body and noticing how connected you feel with them is so much more important. In fact, I was talking to this woman who had attended one of my play parties, and she had mentioned playing with this man who communicated what he wanted really clearly. He talked about what he didn't want, his intentions. But he came on so aggressively and so dominantly in this very forceful sort of way. It actually triggered her into feeling a little more in this freeze kind of mode. So she started to fawn. She was a little triggered. So she was agreeing to play with him in ways that her whole body wasn't actually a heck yes to. And in retrospect, yes, she did actually say she was available for play. But if he was a really skillful lover or play partner, he would have noticed the disconnection, right? He would have noticed that her body was shut down. She wasn't being responsive. She wasn't really present and connected to him. So that's why I always say, like, staying on the surface with communication will only get you so far. It might start the connection, but the attunement is what keeps the connection safe. And that's something that a lot of people don't really learn a lot about, is attunement. And how do I really hold the me and we simultaneously while using discernment to honor both? Like, how do I feel myself? How do I feel you? And hold the both of us at the same time. That shows a lot of mastery.
Are you ready to plug into the latest science of longevity and human performance? Come to Beyond, the biohacking conference, where biology, longevity, and consciousness collide in real life. Experience breakthrough tech, meet world-class experts, and connect with people who are also committed to being the best versions of themselves. Join us May 27th through 29th, 2026 in Austin, Texas. Register now at beyondconference.com. Live longer, live better, live beyond.
So if that makes a good dom, what makes a good sub?
Oh, it's interesting because a lot of the same qualities that I think make a good dom, attunement, presence, surrender, collaboration, creativity, authenticity, accountability, kind of goes both ways. Like, it kind of goes both ways for both play partners, because it is important that someone who's in the follower position knows that this is not a passive role. You know, you can use words like dom sub, but I like to use leader follower, because to me, being an erotic leader is someone who can guide and influence and inspire life force energy. And an erotic follower, it's the embodiment and expression of that life force energy. You could also substitute those names for artist and muse. Like, there's not a passive role being a submissive, and it's important that a good submissive advocates for themselves and that they express what their needs are, and that they're attuned to themselves and their body and noticing when things aren't working or if they're shutting down, and being able to communicate that clearly to your partner, and being collaborative and not just expecting to lay there, you know, like a dead fish, and wanting to contribute energetically even to the experience that's happening. I mean, nothing's worse than having a lover that just kind of lays there, right? Like,
Yeah.
I like expression. Like, let me know if this is working or not. I can't read minds. So also, like, a good sub is someone who expresses and embodies that life force energy, and that sort of the fan to the flame almost, you know?
Who shouldn't go to a play party?
Play parties are not for everyone. It actually takes a lot of maturity, and to really be able to hold a space that's sensitive, that's vulnerable. It's good for people who know how to listen and are able to attune, like we mentioned earlier. But play parties, people kind of think it's going to be this like all-you-can-eat buffet. And they're like, I can't wait to just gorge myself. And because they think it's that, they show up starving. They're like, okay, finally I'm going to get fed. And when you show up starving, that energy doesn't really add to the atmosphere, because it's like, I'm starving to feel desired. I'm starving to feel validated. I'm starving to feel wanted, whatever those things are. But when you show up feeling sort of fulfilled and thinking to yourself, like, this might be more of a tapas situation. There might be a little tasting of this and then maybe a little tasting of that, where there might be some exposure to learning something new about myself or learning something new about people in general. If you come in with the idea of like, I want to show up, not just because I want to get something out of it and like, what am I going to get? It's like, what do I want to give? Like, what do I want to bring? Maybe it's just presence. Maybe it's just kindness. Maybe it's just openness. You know, those are the type of people that really thrive in a play party setting.
What happens at a play party?
Yeah. So a play party is just a space where people can explore erotically, and they can explore in a way that's tantric, that's sexual, that's kinky. It's really up to the individual, but usually it's a space that welcomes people's fantasies and desires. And there's a possibility to be able to explore that in a community setting.
So it's not an orgy.
It doesn't always have to look like that. No, that's
But it
the
could
first
be.
question people always ask me, like, okay, you're having a play party, so does that mean I'm going to just walk into an orgy? And I'm like, no. Like, it starts with an opening ceremony. Everyone's fully clothed. We, do some icebreaker games. We talk about the agreements. We get people sort of comfortable and build the foundation together. And then, it's sort of a pick your own adventure. The spaces that I curate, it's a mix of, kink and energetics and tantra and sexuality. But we created it in a way where we have designated areas for designated types of play. That way, if you don't feel like you're really available or open to being in a kinky setting, you would stay out of a certain room. If you don't feel like you're really available for anything that feels too sexual, you would stay out of a certain part of the venue. So people get to really, decide how they want to navigate that space.
So there are dungeons, like places set up for couples just to come in and play. Right. And then there are like swinger parties where people come in with the intent of having sex, maybe less of the kink sort of thing. And then there are BDSM parties, and then there are conscious kink parties. What is the difference between all of those?
Oh my gosh. It's a good question because there are so many different types of flavors for sure. And getting really clear on what you're available for is going to help direct you on what sort of environment would work best for you. My play parties in particular have a bit of everything, a little mix of all of it, but they're completely sober events. There's no alcohol or any types of altering substances at
Except
my
maybe
events.
Cialis.
What's that?
Except Cialis.
Oh, so yeah, that's right. Terrible. Sometimes. But, for people who maybe aren't available for a kink, they might be more interested in the swinger parties because those tend to not be kinky and they tend to focus on sexuality and people exploring in that way. But it's really important, no matter what you explore, that you do your research because play parties are not the same. And you want to make sure that it's a well-established experience that has good referrals, that it's been around. Because some places, with all things, can be a little on the seedier side or maybe not as well organized or not as conscious. And I know for the events that I like to do, I want to offer people that like baby step in, like, just get your pinky toe dipped in the shallow end of the pool as opposed to just diving into the deep end. And creating a safe space where people can be first timers or beginners, or maybe even have some sexual trauma under their belt, but they want to heal that. My type of events or sober events like that are the best option for people.
And you curate all the people at your events, so they've been through your training.
That's right. It's not open to the public. It's by invite only, and it's only available for people who have worked with me or trained with me, or they're accompanied by someone who has.
Got it. So that creates just a level of expectation about behavior.
It does. And it's not so much about status, but it's about like how erotically intelligent are you? If you're going to invest in that, we want to be able to curate spaces where people can feel safe, but also be around others who are really at a higher level of experience so that everyone can just have like a really amazing time together.
When you're training people, what does that look like?
Depending on who I work with men, women, and couples. In some cases, it could be couples who are looking to bring back some of that spiciness into their relationship. They've been together 10, 15, 20 years, and they feel like things have fallen a little flat, and they want to find ways of like igniting that passion again or that novelty. So they might reach out to me and say like, oh, we want to experience Tantra together, or we want to understand how we could bring power dynamics into the relationship. Like, can you help guide us through that experience? And I'll work with people in that capacity. It's interesting, though. I also work with individuals who have extraordinarily successful businesses and all of that. But as successful as their businesses are, they find that their sex lives are mediocre. And there's like a disconnect there. Like, how do I have so much success in these areas of life, but feel like my relationships or my sex life is pretty flat? And that dissonance can actually be an energy sucker in a lot of ways. So we look at like, well, what's keeping you from also having an extraordinary sex life if you're doing well in business? Because ultimately, once we take a look at that and we can work with those things, you'll find very often that it's going to affect business even more so. And there'll be even more success or even more pleasure when it comes to the way that somebody's working in the world. So yeah, I work with entrepreneurs. I work with people who have done a lot of personal development work. They've done Tony Robbins, they've done Joe Dispenza, but they haven't started working on their sexuality or really looked at that part of their lives yet. And that kind of means that they're not moving from wholeness. And that's what we start to work with.
In the biohacking framework
Yeah.
that I use around your body processes fear. It can either be fear or peace.
Mm-hmm.
And then food can either be hunger or gluttony or nourishment. And then the next F word, which is the one we're talking about.
Right.
And that can be an incredible source of power and energy and nourishment as well.
Right.
But you have to ask for what you want. And you might need to do as much development there as you did to learn how to eat right or to learn how to deal with your fear. And it's the area that's least talked about in terms of energetics, in terms of biohacking. But it's a major important one because the next F word that comes after that is friends. That's how we build community.
Yeah.
And so I put that in the book, even though it was a little bit, probably a little bit risky in terms of hitting the New York Times list or whatever, because it's
good for you, Dave. Well, that's great. I love it.
Hit the USA list. It's a #1 best-selling philosophy book in the world, and you're in it. So there you go.
I'm so honored.
and it's one of those things where it's sometimes hard to put words to it, but you said it right when you said life force energy.
Yeah.
And libido is what makes companies.
Totally.
It's what makes things happen in the world. And so if you're flat there, maybe because you just never learned or you don't know how to ask for what you want, or you don't know what you want, it feels like going to a professional might be a smart idea. How do people respond when you tell them what kind of professional you are?
Oh, well, I get one of two responses. It's either like, oh, I got to go over here now, right? And see you later. Or it's I have something to tell you. You know, like there's almost like an excitement and a naughtiness to being like, I want to know more because I have stuff going on in my life that I feel like I want to talk to someone about. And people will divulge, a lot of their very sexy secrets to me all the time. And I find that to be really funny, but it also really interesting because, people aren't discussing these things otherwise. Like I remember I was having a conversation with my friend who's a yoga instructor, and I was like telling her I had this really powerful self-pleasuring practice that I did. And I particularly had a beautiful experience where I just felt really alive and lit up. And she was listening to me talk and she's like, God, I wish we could talk like this normally to other people. I'm like, can you imagine just being able to share someone like, oh, I have this fantasy that, I lived out one of the fantasies that I've always wanted to try with somebody. And I had so much fun. Like we don't talk about these things, but I think we'd be so much better for it if we could talk about these things and not, you said we're not really talking about these things because there's so much shame and there's so much fear of rejection. And this is part of the way we nourish our bodies. Erotic expression is a very nourishing way to fill ourselves up with that life force energy.
Why do you think people feel like they have to hide the things they actually want?
Right. I think a lot of different reasons, but culturally speaking, talking about our desires feels either indulgent or shameful in a lot of ways. And that can come from, again, culture, from religion most of the time. And in one way, like, yay, because that has helped me stay in business because there's a lot of these kinks and desires and fetishes come from that repression and come from that place of a scarcity almost. But honestly, like I truly believe if we had more freedom here and more liberation here, there'd be a lot less war. I mean, if you've ever had a great sex session and had a lot of orgasms and pleasure, I think the last thing you want to do is start a war, right? I mean, you tell me.
It's true. I have an old book on my shelf called The Women Who Sleep with Men to Take the War Out of Them.
Oh, I love it.
Isn't that a great title?
Fantastic. Mm-hmm.
So there is some kind of a really deep cathartic healing that I've seen in men and women in this kind of space, even at your parties.
Yeah.
Where it's a sacred kind of intimate thing that's really, there's no sex happening. It's just like intimate touch and people being really vulnerable.
Yeah.
And it's powerful. And I feel like most people who either haven't read the book or this is new information, they're thinking it's an orgy. And
Right.
I see very little sex at your play parties. And clearly, guys, I've been to at least one of Kimi's play parties. And so I've also done her 6-month training program and actually lectured at it.
One of my best students, actually.
Well, so, and what I found it to be was very much, this is about managing your own energy and your own power and like how you show up. And yeah, sure, there's techniques and all that stuff, but it's really about showing up in a certain way, right? And learning how to choose that. And I think that's a skill that's missing. And one word that comes to mind is authenticity. And what's your take on authenticity? Can you fake it? Can you teach it?
Authenticity is really like aligning with what your truth, like your innate truth is, like the truth that you were born with that can't be taken from you. It's not debatable. It is part of who you are before the noise and the conditioning and the programming. And being able to delayer or wash away the things that keep people from being authentic, is part of shadow work. It's part of healing from trauma. It's part of like seeing through the veil and getting out of the matrix in a lot of ways, because we are so much more dynamic than we give ourselves credit for. Like we really get, in a kinky sense, we get really addicted and we become slaves to comfort, And authenticity is courage at the end of the day. Can you choose courage over comfort? Because a lot of us stay in that job just a little too long. We just don't know if we can leave that job or that relationship. Like, we stayed in that relationship a few more months than we really wanted to stay in it. But we can be so submissive to comfort and security that it takes away our aliveness at the end of the day. So, the idea of authenticity is also tapping into that sense of aliveness and being able to share that uninhibitedly with others. And when you do, what the magic that happens is you give others permission to be authentically themselves as well. And it's kind of a contagious thing that can happen. But it's also something that's really terrifying because, again, we're so submissive to comfort and wanting to be liked and wanting to be safe that oftentimes we lean away from being authentic in some senses.
I love that answer. What separates healthy desire from compulsive behavior?
Yeah. So desire without discernment is distortion at the end of the day. So there's something that's interesting when it comes to Tantra. Tantra actually has a lot to say around fantasy, and kink is all about fantasy.
Sure.
Fantasy is an invitation to knowing the truth. But oftentimes people get really hooked into the fantasy itself and not the sacred message underneath it. Like, not many people are wondering why they want that threesome or why they want to be spanked and tied up, for example. And when we don't examine our desires, then we kind of are missing out on something here. Like, we're missing out on an opportunity to really know thyself on a deeper level. So the idea of our desires being a doorway towards understanding ourselves better is beautiful. I think the compulsion aspect is just sort of staying stuck and just kind of getting that dopamine hit in a sense. It's surfacey. It doesn't really take you anywhere. It doesn't really evolve or go places. Someone who's really deep diving into their desires is also integrating what they're learning from it in the process. I work with people who say, like, I would love a session where you humiliate me. And for me, while I have skill in being able to do that, those types of sessions don't interest me unless it's going to lead us towards something that's going to be evolving them in some sense. So I could say to someone, like, I'm willing to experiment with the desire that you have as is, as long as we have an agreement that we're going to continuously explore in a way that's going to deepen it even more. Like, I had this man. He had a desire to be kidnapped by powerful Amazonian women, taken to their lair, and forced to do their bidding.
I guess he watched too much Wonder Woman.
I think he did, yes. And he had this fantasy since he was 12, and he was really excited about this fantasy. Meanwhile, he was telling me about his life. In his life, he basically just did everything he was told to do. His parents told him what school to go to and what to study and what woman to marry and all of these things. So he was sharing a fantasy with me about being forced to do things he didn't want to do. Meanwhile, he's telling me about a life that he feels like he was doing things for others and for his parents and not really living the life he wanted to live. So I told him, I'm like, I'm going to create this fantasy for you. I'm going to do the fantasy as you depict. However, I want to do it again in about a month. And this time we're going to do it my way. So I got another female friend to join in on this session. We kidnapped him on the street, threw a bag over his head and threw him into a trunk of a car.
Oh, wow.
And thank God we didn't get arrested.
Right.
Drove him to a play space where we were conducting the scene, took him out, and, we basically bossed him around and told him what to do, tied him up, took him through experiences that involved impact play and flogging and spanking, and gave him the experience that he had been thinking about since he was 12 years old. And at the end of that experience, he was completely blown away and was like, oh my gosh, like that was amazing. And I felt like free of responsibility, and I felt taken care of, and I felt like time stood still, and I felt like I was no longer, in charge of anything. And it was really a beautiful experience. Anyway, he came back a month later and we did the scene again. But before we started, I let him know, we're going to do the scene again, but this time you have to ask for everything.
Oh, wow.
If you don't ask, I won't move. Like, you have to ask. If it's something that I'm not available for, I'll let you know. But you have to ask to be tied up. You have to ask to be spanked. You have to ask to be humiliated. You have to ask for everything. And I want you to see what that feels like. So we did the scene like that again. And he cried the whole time.
Wow.
And at the end of the scene, I was holding him in my arms and he was sharing like, wow, if I can ask for what I want here, why can't I ask for it anywhere? And I'm like, you can. You just proved that you can. And that completely changed the trajectory of his life because he had a visceral bodily experience of something that was different than what he had been living beforehand. And he saw that he was okay and that he was alive and that he got his needs met and that he felt stronger for it. And it was a really impactful experience. And that was a case of like, let's look at your desires as a doorway into understanding yourself better, but let's not stay there forever. Let's continue to evolve more and more and more so you can have not just your desires and dreams met in the playroom, but you can have it met in life as well.
Well, that's a classical story of healing, something that probably would have been stuck forever. Do you think that you could have healed that through pure somatic therapy?
I mean, there were so many somatic elements within that experience, absolutely. But he came to me because that was his North Star. That was his compass, right? Feeling into his repression around sexuality and also looking at the ways he was repressing himself in his own life. They were all connected. So that was his pathway. And perhaps he could have done it in a different form of therapy, but it's been my experience that you can be in therapy for 20 years.
Yeah.
And on a trauma loop over and over and over again. But when you're actually in human contact with someone else and moving through something in an expanded, altered state of consciousness, energy really starts to move and your mind really starts to shift in ways that are so much more impactful and faster as well than as opposed to just talking about it over and over and over again.
I've come to believe that trauma healing requires an altered state. You just don't get in the state by talking about something.
Right.
And you can talk about it for a very long time. And you have to go into these places that are felt senses to do it. And it sounds like in that case, that's just a very rapid way to put them in a very altered state.
Oh, gosh.
Kind of like ketamine or something would have done.
It's like, when the record is skipping and you kind of have to take the needle off of the record and put it down somewhere else. That's kind of what we're doing here because it's like, let's get you so far out of your element and so out of your comfort zone and so out of your idealized image of yourself and identity and like drop you somewhere completely different and see what you learn from that. Similar to psilocybin, yes, and ayahuasca and MDMA. But doing it, through the erotic is that charge of the taboo. And then there's so much related to relationship in that as well, which a lot of our trauma is from, is relationship and the contact we had with others, or the lack of contact that we had with others. It only makes sense that we need positive relational experiences to rewrite those belief systems that formed through trauma and to rewire our brains as well.
Speaking of relationships, is it hard for you to be in relationships?
So the thing that gets hard with me being in relationship is that I'm so comfortable in my sexuality and so good with where I'm at in my life that I have zero tolerance for people, especially men. I'm bisexual, but especially men who are not as comfortable in that part of their lives. They might be holding some stuff around being, performance centered, or around, being dominant enough, or there's like some ego driven stuff that's going on there. And for me, that's really a turnoff in a lot of ways. And because I teach and I do healing work with others, I don't really want to do that in my personal relationships. So
you don't want to be the dom at home and at work?
No. Can I send them to you? Can you help me? Can you whip them into shape for me, please?
I can totally respect that. And I mean, you've definitely explored all of your depths, right? Mm-hmm. Which lets you be such a powerful teacher. Yeah. And it's very interesting when you're teaching because I've been through all kinds of spiritual classes and monasteries and things like that. And the stuff you're doing is more in that vibe. Like you're showing people a state, like an energetic state and how to do it, versus like, here's the technical skill of doing whatever. So I could see that would require someone who's done a lot of work themselves. Otherwise, like, I don't want to do that for you too, because I'm done. I get that.
Totally. It's just Tony Robbins meets dominatrix meets lingerie. I mean, what's not to like about that situation?
What a great description.
That's me, Tony Robbins in lingerie, basically.
Thank goodness you can get his voice. That wouldn't match the outfit at all.
That's right.
Talk to me about what happens after a scene with someone.
So the most important part of any medicine journey or expansive experience is the integration process. And that's where aftercare comes in. And, people have probably heard this term aftercare before, and it is literally the care you receive after an expanded experience. And people think it's cuddles and snacks. And yes, it can be all of that, but it's really an opportunity to integrate what has taken place and to really be able to not just create a soft landing for yourself and your partner, but to also, as you're acclimating, to reflect on like, what were the things I learned about myself and about life through this process? Because quite often there's so much gold in those experiences to like really notice, like, where did you hold back, or where did you freeze up, or where did you feel the most powerful, or where did you feel the most free, and getting really curious about those instances, because there's reasons why that shows up in your field. There's a reason why it's showing up. And is there something that needs to be looked at or needs attention in your life? So the aftercare, yes, is about getting your body reacclimated and to take care of your nervous system as it comes back to homeostasis. But it's also an opportunity to reflect and to feel into the places that maybe still need growth or need love or need attention, so that you can continue to evolve and continue to have more pleasure and fun.
Beautiful. I think a lot of people, if you read 50 Shades of Grey, okay, great, I'm going to go try this. You should replay this part of the show because it's what you do after a situation like that that I think makes it much more healing and much more, we'll call it, of an altered states experience versus just, we had a really good time.
Absolutely. I mean, I love you. I once saw you do a talk and you talked about the power of witnessing. Right. And when you're with a play partner, you're having an experience with them, but you're also co-witnessing each other.
Yeah.
Right.
In fact, that may be the secret of a play party. Like, you don't have to, you can go with a partner. You have to touch anyone else.
Yeah.
But having a witness anytime you're doing trauma work it has this amazing effect of keeping you from deceiving yourself later.
Right.
Because your ego knows, okay, I can make them forget this thing. And I've been with people who have profound healing from neurofeedback. And then 5 minutes later, they completely forgot what they just did. But if they talk about it in front of a witness, then it sticks.
Mm-hmm.
And when people are at a play party, they're doing something that's probably considered naughty, or they wouldn't be at a play party.
Sure.
But they're doing it, and there's other people around, and no one does anything negative. In fact, it's supportive.
Mm-hmm.
And just having those witnesses, I think, lets you remember the lesson you got from it.
Totally.
And also just feel safe,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because your nervous system is probably saying, like, if somebody sees me, semi-naked, oh no, it's the end of the world. And it's not the end of the world, but it feels like the end of the world.
Totally.
So then when you're witnessed that way and it's not the end of the world, it shifts your reality. It makes you feel more embodied and safer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's part of healing. It's just the part that's least talked about. But I feel like
So
the show's a good place to talk about things like that, right?
I agree. John Wineland says, there's always a contraction after the expansion, but sometimes the contraction is almost your ego trying to snap you back into the familiar.
That's
So
what ego does.
if you have someone to call you forward and say, I see you, I remember your power or your surrender or your softness and your pleasure, I won't let you forget. You're absolutely right. That really kind of it sticks with you so much deeper when you know that it was a journey that you had with someone else.
Even if you don't know them.
Even if you don't know them sometimes.
When people have suppressed desire, how does it leak into their work, into their relationships, into their life?
Yeah, it's so interesting because I talk a lot about congruence, for example. And there's this idea of when we're not congruent with who we truly are, if we're not living in authenticity, when we're not really owning our desires and owning what we want, there's a way that we push it down, but it never disappears, right? It just kind of comes out sideways in these leaky ways. And that can be translated to so many things. I mean, one of the examples that comes to mind immediately and what gets people nervous about even attending a play party is that they're nervous about creepers or creeper energy, or that they're going to be the creeper. By the way, if you're worried about being a creeper, then you're probably not a creeper. But this idea of not really owning your desire and what you want, it does kind of come out in these insidious ways where people can feel it, but it's this unspoken thing. And it's where are you being incongruent with what you want and who you are? Because once you're in alignment with that, you have really clean, healthy energy at the end of the day. Otherwise, you're going to notice life gets really hard when you're not congruent and things don't really fall into place. And you're always kind of feeling like you're chasing or forcing things to happen as opposed to it just unfolding the way it's supposed to. So yeah, get curious. I mean, look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, where am I not really being honest with myself?
Congruence is one of the most important things for leadership.
You're so right. Yeah.
When your inner state and your outer state don't match,
right,
everybody knows.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because of anything you're doing. It's because we feel each other's energy, even if we aren't consciously aware that we do that. And some people are more conscious than others of that. So
absolutely,
being in full congruence might mean, talking to your partner and saying, I want this thing that I've never mentioned before. Do you ever get clients who said that to their partner who then kicked them out of the house?
That they expressed a desire that they wanted, and once that was met, they kicked them out?
Not just once it was met, but you expressed a desire, and their partner's like, "That's it! How dare you?
How dare you?" Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because again, when it comes to sexuality and the erotic, I mean, there is no space or place that is as vulnerable or as sensitive, and people have a lot of fear around sexuality. So if a partner, someone that you trust, or maybe you've put them in a box to be a certain way for you or show up for you in a certain light, comes to you and totally throws you off guard with this desire or our need that they have erotically, it can actually shut another person down pretty significantly. I mean, that's kind of why I break out my kink checklist that I like to go through with people before I even have sex with them. I'm like, so tell me, what do you think about spanking? thinking? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? But for the people who are already in established relationships, it's always a good idea to say like, hey, I want to have a conversation with you about desires and fantasies. Like, I want to actually give you the opportunity to be mentally prepared and emotionally prepared for a conversation around sexuality. And let's see if we can kind of move ourselves towards a better understanding of what we're needing or what we're curious about, and see if we can collaborate with each other on that. Is there a way where if I'm voicing a desire that I have, but it feels like a 10 to you, is there a way that we can explore it in a sense that would be on a scale of 2 or 3? Like, can we be creative in how we talk about it? Sometimes I say, like, if you have a certain fantasy in mind, before asking your partner to play it out with you, maybe you can both lay together, holding each other, and verbally talk about it out loud using some descriptive language, and notice how it's feeling in each of your bodies, like giving yourself an opportunity to talk about it, feel into it before you start like breaking out the toys and stuff like that, like really feeling into those baby steps, because people easily become overwhelmed. Maybe it's trauma, fear, there's ego, there's so many reasons. But yeah, sexuality is something that's so sensitive for others. I have a lot of compassion for that, for sure.
Okay.
But I do think the most romantic thing you can do for someone is help them make their fantasies come true. I think it's way better than getting flowers.
You have a big point there.
Yeah. I mean, really, like, to say, like, I'm scared to tell you this, but this is what I want to experience. And if someone's like, tell me more, like, how can we make this happen in a way that feels safe and supportive to you? Like, oh, like I could cry just telling you, like, like how beautiful that is to not just be seen and accepted, but to be celebrated, and to hear someone say like, yeah, I want to do this with you. It is so powerful, so very powerful indeed.
Yeah, that can be incredibly nourishing for people.
Sure.
Like, if someone who's been starving for something their whole life, they're afraid to ask for it, they finally ask for it, and then they get it, versus get rejected for it.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I think that's why people are always calling and saying, Kimi, help me learn how to do this.
Absolutely.
Okay. Is it true that people show up in the bedroom the same way they show up in the rest of their life?
I believe in a lot of ways how we do one thing is how we do everything, and that they're all sort of connected. I don't think that we can really compartmentalize ourselves when it comes to sexuality. A quote that I love is by Oscar Wilde, and he says, everything is sex except sex. Sex is about power. So
that's a cool quote.
Yeah, it's great. I think he's dead on, because we're surrounded by sex. We all come from sex. We're all having sex. And there's a lot of charge when it comes to sex. Recently I was asked by a pastor to come talk to his church about sex, about sexuality. And at first I was like, what? You want me to talk about Tantra and Kink at your church? And it like kind of shocked me a little bit. But when I felt into it, I was like, actually, I mean, I talk about sexuality being such an important a part of our lives that it's as important as our spirituality, and hopefully that you can connect your spirituality to your sexuality as well. And it was actually it made a lot of sense, because again, we're talking about life force energy. We're talking about the creative energy, creation itself. And it makes sense that we should be able to bring this element into spirituality as well, to me.
Well, 20% of people report meeting God during orgasm at least once in their life.
That's amazing.
So there might be a connection between life force energy and our connection to the divine.
This is one of the most miraculous parts of life when you think about it, like being able to have that sort of pleasure where for moments it's like time stands still and, nothing else matters. And it's just, the sense of feeling one love and feeling that much pleasure, that it's mind-boggling to me that people don't utilize this as an access point to the divine as well, like being able to have that level of pleasure. If you believe in God, then you need to remember that your body was built and to have pleasure at the end of the day. And people think pleasure is an indulgence, but it's our birthright, in my opinion. If
you look at Taoism and Tantra, and traditional Tantra practices are not really about sex, they're about energy.
Totally.
And they are spiritual practices. They just incorporate some of this stuff. So
Yeah.
I feel like the schism between like a deep, intimate connection that includes sex and the spiritual practices, it's an artificial break, and that there's so much overlap. And people talk about, reaching a state of ecstasy during prayer and things like that.
Right.
So there's room in society for a little bit more flexibility, because I'm pretty sure that even highly religious people have sex.
Mm.
I mean, they have kids, so we know it happened.
Right.
And maybe it was with shame and whatever else, but I think it's beautiful that a pastor invited you in to talk about that, because healthy relationships, they matter. And if you try to have a healthy relationship and you ever talk about sex, it's probably not going to work.
It's so true. It's so true. And I think that's what I get more and more excited about as I see with biohackers and with, and then even with this younger generation, like people just aren't settling anymore for mediocrity, and that includes their sex life as well. They're not willing to have passionless relationships and to have subpar sexual encounters. Like people want more. They want depth. They want intimacy. They want ecstasy. They want all the pleasure. And I love seeing that the more information is getting out on how you can achieve that, and instead of keeping it in the shadows, and giving people an opportunity to blossom into their fullest potential in all regards.
Wow, I love that. I've worked with several couples over the last couple of years who just said, look, our relationship is really flat and we just don't know where to go. And I've said, you should call Kimi. Like, seriously, bring someone in who's a professional who will tell you, do this, do that. You need to take a deep breath. You need to look at them. And it's not that hard. And it's not like they're having sex with you. You're like the orchestrator. And
that's right. Yeah.
Teaching skills. And I feel like a lot of people who've been married for a while would greatly benefit from saying, it's not let's spice things up in the bedroom. Let's acquire skills so our relationship will be stronger, because our connection is stronger. And I think we just don't talk about that much. But
totally,
when that kind of thing happens, both partners like, wow, I have a smile on my face all the time, and my relationship is stronger, right?
Totally.
And it's different than having a threesome. But earlier, you said there must be a reason why people want a threesome or they want a spanking. Well, what's the reason?
It's different for everyone, but getting curious around where someone's desires come from. I always look at, like, when it comes to our desires, our fantasies, it's just strategies to meet our needs on some level. So what's the need underneath the desire? For some, wanting to step into dominance, is there's a need to feel a value, or to feel powerful, or to feel autonomous. It could to feel creative. For those who seek to be in the submissive role, it could be this, need to let go, need to be free of responsibility, need to be taken care of. Coming to as an idea of threesomes, for example, it depends on whether it's a man wanting to be with two women, and you take these things for granted, but there might be a real need for more feminine energy. The feminine represents a nurturing energy and a freedom and a wildness and an excitement, which is the polar opposite of what the masculine energy is supposed to hold. So same thing with a woman wanting to be with two men. She might want to really feel overwhelmed by that animal masculine energy, and to feel like she can release and let go and be handled and taken care of as well. So it's interesting. So when I interview people and we talk about their desires, I get curious around, like, well, what do you feel like that does for you? Like, what is it about that act or that activity or that role that really, like, is intriguing to you? And a lot of people don't think about it. They don't really get curious. But sometimes we can even, rewind time and look back at some of our initial impressions around sexuality and relationships and love, and find that a lot of the times what our impressions were as children are our desires as adults. And we've eroticized sometimes the needs that we had as children that were not met as children. And we found ways to eroticize them as adults as well.
So if you eroticize them and then you get them met, it provides a little window for healing some of that, right?
It can be. You know, I work with a lot of men who are very powerful and successful, you know, CEOs who want to be dominated. And a lot of the time, that's their creative wisdom of their body saying, like, we need to create more balance in our lives. We're always calling the shots. We're always in charge. We're always so responsible. We're always holding all the spinning plates in the air. What would happen if we let all of those fall? Like, what would happen if we can just receive and just be as opposed to always doing? And it's interesting because when I've worked with these powerful men and they come to this realization of, because a lot of them hold a lot of shame that they want to be dominated, but then they realize, like, oh, actually, this is a really clever, wise way that my psyche is really helping me create more balance in my life, so that I'm not always in this one extreme all the time, that I'm also playing in the other spectrums of life. Because, you know, we hold a wide spectrum of what we can hold, like our capacity for exploration and our sense of adventure. If we're just constantly living in one bracket all the time, you're going to start to feel like something's missing. You're going to maybe start seeking things out, even subconsciously. We do it in the relationships we choose. We do it in the work that we choose. And the same thing happens in our sex life. You know, we can look at our desires, similar to dreams. So, you know, there's symbolism in dreams. There's symbolism in our desires as well. So when we get a chance to look at that, we can start to say, like, am I moving from choice or am I moving from default? Because at the end of the day, I just want people to move from choice, not from default.
It's pretty well known that a lot of CEOs want to be subs. I mean, it's in the movies, it's in TV shows. I mean, it's almost a trope at this point.
I mean, being a sub is awesome. I mean, think about it. You just like get to receive the pleasure and taken on a journey and like, you know, be given to, and you get to just exist and be accepted for who you are. Like, what's not amazing about that? That sounds so fun. I mean, in my personal life, I like to be a submissive. And you asked me earlier what makes a good dom. I believe a good dom is also someone who can follow, that can also submit, that can also surrender.
I would agree. You need to own all aspects of your energy in order to be able to show up fully in either side of it.
Yeah.
It's interesting. A lot of female CEOs I know are in exactly the same situation. They're saying, I'm tired of spinning all the plates. Like, they want to be dominated as well.
Totally.
So it seems like
everyone.
Like everyone in leadership has some, like, how do I get balance? You know, maybe someone can tie me up. You're like, what?
Yeah.
But you explained the logic there, so I'm not going to argue with it.
It's true. It's so true. And a good top and a good dom is hard to find. There's actually a lot of subs out there in the world. You know, they might be closeted subs, but a lot of people want to experience surrender and to, you know, drop into this concept of subspace, which is that altered state of consciousness. You're getting high off of your own supply. It feels so good. And it's such a beautiful experience to like really release your 9-to-5 identity and to actually like play with your other sub-personalities in a sense. You know, Carl Jung talks about these archetypes and these subpersonalities that we have. We're within us as an orchestra, but we're sometimes just stuck playing that damn violin over and over and over. Like, let the drums play. Like, let these other aspects of yourself come out and play, because you learn a lot about yourself when you're able to expand beyond who you are in the boardroom. Like, who are you outside of the boardroom?
This all makes sense. And, you know, having been through, you know, a couple of your classes now,
right.
There's something here that is much bigger than, oh, I want to do something kinky. Yeah. It's an altered states experience that can be recreational, and it can also be really deeply and profoundly life-changing healing work. Yeah. And so I just wanted to thank you for being willing to say, yeah, I've done somatic therapy, but this is how I do it now. Because, you know, that's it's not always a popular path. But I think it's a worthy path. So thanks for sharing your work with the world. Your classes are very powerful, and I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much. I love talking about this stuff. So anytime.
You've got it, Kimi. And your website is andmorepresents.com.
That's right.
Beautiful. So guys, if you really wanted a spanking, or maybe to give a spanking, you know what to do. Go tell someone that that's what you want and see what happens.
See you next time on the Human Upgrade Podcast.